Told me he got pulled over by the cops for wobbly driving on his bike and they thought he was drunk. Turned out he was just dodging all the slugs on the street. Teachers of Reddit, what was the best excuse for being late that turned out to be true? Physics, 11th grade. The day prior to this day, my neighbor passed away and her son was a friend of mine and also in this class. Terribly long story, but it was a suicide by hanging and I was the one who found her. I had nightmares all night and skipped the first half of school the next day. When my physics teacher saw me later, she asked where I was that morning. Before I could explain, she said that friend was looking for you and concerned. He seemed more worried than he should have been and was a little upset about you not being there. The guy's mom died, but he still went to class and didn't tell anyone, but was worried about me. I couldn't tell her what had happened at that point, so I just said I overslept. I had a student whose father had died and had not done any homework or prep for the geography class. From what I heard, the teacher scolded him for not doing so, but the student didn't want to say anything, presumably sensitive issue. So his best friend shouted at the teacher, "Don't you have any shame? His father died last night." And the teacher said, "I don't care." There was an audible gasp, and I was in the next room. Needless to say, the teacher is no longer employed here. My auto teacher let me practice removing and adding the tires on his vehicle. The next morning, it was about 20 minutes into first period and no sign of him. He comes running into the classroom out of breath, and his hair is all messed up. He points at me and says, "What is a torque wrench used for?" I respond with, "I don't know." He says, "I know you don't know." Turns out one of his tires came off while driving down the highway. She had to take her sister to school and drive her mom to rehab. She was always late to class because her mom just wanted to sleep in. Problem was, if the mom was late or did not go, she would have violated her probation and gone to prison. I never marked her late. If she missed anything important, she could come in at lunch or after school to make it up. Student here, I headed into school early to get some studying done in the library before my night class. I was one exit away when I was caught in a 3-car accident. Most of the expressway afterwards was gridlock with only one lane left open. I'd eventually make it into my lab class 15 minutes late, with a few scrapes and bruises. My professor's reaction was simply, "Oh, that was you." Not a student, but one of my teaching assistants when I ran a preschool in West Philly. "Sorry I missed yesterday. My friend shot my mom." Naturally, I'm a little speechless. "Oh no, it's okay. He was aiming for someone else." I was one of about 20 kids who were late to school. We showed up at the school office as a group, and when questioned why we were late, we said the school bus blew up. They questioned, "So the engine blew up?" The kids, "No, the whole bus in flames." It blew up. There was much conference between the teachers, all of them thinking we embellished the story. Next thing you know, one of the admin staff has the news website open, very obvious image of an entire bus on fire with a bunch of kids in our school uniforms standing in front of it. Our late slip for class read, "School bus blew up." Not teacher, but pupil. I was in a car crash on my way to school. About 5 cars involved because some jerk decided to overtake us since we slowed down coming to a turn. So a trip to the hospital to get checked, and then school 3 hours late. I had small cuts all over my face from glass flying everywhere and had a really sore shoulder, but my teachers wouldn't believe me until police showed up because they forgot to get a statement from me. Apparently some of the other involved people died AMD. Jerk got 8 years in prison after 9/11. My small-town high school received bomb threats every week for 2 months, and they decided to make us attend school on a Saturday. Myself and about 5 others showed up for our classes, and every teacher said something like, "I can't wait for the excuses on Monday." Most of the excuses were something along the lines of family plans or whatnot, but one kid was made read his dad's note aloud to the class because our first period teacher thought it was hilarious. In the most down-south accent you can imagine, it went something like, "My son ain't too smart, but he knows you ain't supposed to get punished for someone else being a dumb. Bought him a 6-pack, so he was drunk." Y'all can have *CK off. I wish we had smartphones to record back then so I could share it. I'm not the teacher, but we were told that he had a paramedic student who, on their way to write their final exam, rolled their car into a creek, picked up whatever books they had out of their car, and ran the rest of the way to class. Obviously got there late and in tears. You better believe they had a different exam date. When I was student teaching, I was late because there was bunch chickens in the middle of the road. They wouldn't move at all. This is in the middle of a city of 200,000 people. Freaking chickens. I finally get to school and profusely apologize to my mentor teacher, and I told her why I was late thinking it sounded ridiculous. She said, "Yeah, those chickens are if they surrounded my car in the McDonald's parking lot last year. Don't worry about." In high school, I biked to class. One day I hit a rock and ate absolute. I obviously got to class late. Before I could say a word, my teacher stopped class and said, "Thank you for finally joining us. Why are you so late?" I raised my heavily bloodied hands and elbows. It must have looked bad because she audibly gasped and rushed me to the school nurse, apologizing nonstop the entire way. I slipped while cutting my apple up before a soil science lab. It was a medium cut, but there was no makeup lab available for this experiment because it was the first of 3 weeks' experiments. Wrapped it up in toilet paper and figured I'd use the first aid kit in the lab to Steri-strip it shut, worst case scenario, and disinfect it. It didn't hurt much, but it just wouldn't chill out. It was also winter, so I put gloves on and went to catch the bus. 10-minute ride to the uni. By the time I got to the lab, there was blood everywhere. It was a small but very deep cut. I showed up to lab on time, but my professor took at the blood dripping down my arm and said, "I admire you bringing yourself here, but Christ. Go to the clinic." My prof started my experiment for me, literally just making mud milkshakes for an hour, and every subsequent lab would ask if I was missing any limbs that morning. In my hometown, if you walked into anywhere late and said the phrase, "Sorry, grain train," you were never challenged. It was extremely common for 50-plus carriage trains to run through the middle of town. MTV paid me $1.50 to fill my backpack with cement and carry it around for the day. I accepted that excuse. Student later regretted it, as a replacement backpack and college textbooks far exceeded $1.50. But he got his moment of fame, and I didn't penalize him for his gotta live a little. Someone found a newspaper article on this. Turns out it was $200. He earned $100 for the first day and $100 when he returned the next day. I remember $50, but it was 19 years ago. So I was right to believe him. He still lost all his stuff, thanks cement, and I remember him telling me it wasn't worth it. Taught a group of seniors first period. It was towards the end of the year. I had a class of around 30 and only 5 were there when the bell rang. Halfway through class, the rest of them show up. They went out to Cracker Barrel for breakfast and brought me some back. All was forgiven. Bear on the backyard. No access gate. Animal control had to trank it from the room and drag it through the house. Made the news. Got to retake the test I missed after sending her the news article. I was the student. My neighbor had a really social goat, and she figured out how to escape her pen in order to come over and hang out. She escaped and followed me to the bus stop, and when the bus came, she tried to follow me onto it. I couldn't actually get on the bus without her being right behind me, so I had to get off, bring her home, and call my dad to bring me to school. We had an exam in my class, and a teacher got a message from a student saying that he was going to be late because his car had a flat tire. The student was known to party. The teacher didn't think it could be true, so as a joke the teacher asked him to bring the tire back. He brought the flat tire back in the middle of the exam. Needless to say, the professor didn't expect that. Not me, but one of my good friends. She went to the Royal Military College of Canada, where they wear their uniforms and there are often tourists visiting the campus. Apparently, it was completely normal to be waylaid by tourists looking to have their photos taken with students in uniform, that all they had to say when they walked in late was tourists, and the professors would let it slide. She always wondered how many family photos she was actually in over her time spent there. A kid missed my first period class one morning, but was in school later that day. When I asked him why he hadn't arrived in time for my course, he said his cow was birthing its calf that morning, so he picked being in the barn over English. Made sense to me. His essays weren't going to win any ribbons at the county fair, but his calf could.